The stars looked like tiny pinpricks of cold light against the deep black of space. Young-ji Kim gripped the edge of her research station's observation window, her fingers pressing hard against the reinforced glass. Something felt wrong. The research vessel Horizon hummed softly around her. It was supposed to be a routine mission, just another expedition to map the outer communication patterns of unknown civilizations. Her team of 5 researchers had been tracking unusual signal patterns for weeks, picking up fragments of alien transmissions that didn't quite fit any known communication models. Dr. Kim called Jae-sung from the communication console. "We're picking up some weird interference again." Yoon-ji turned. Her eyes, sharp and alert, scanned the holographic displays. The signal patterns were strange, not random, but not following any predictable structure she had ever seen before. It was like watching someone speak a language just at the edge of understanding. "Keep recording," she replied. Her voice was calm, but her mind was racing. The Horizon was a small research ship designed for long-distance communication studies. It carried advanced linguistic analysis equipment, cutting-edge translation algorithms, and a crew selected for their ability to remain calm under unusual circumstances. Yoon-ji was their lead researcher, known for her ability to find patterns where others saw only noise. Suddenly, the ship's warning systems erupted in a chorus of sharp beeps and flashing red lights. Jae-sung's hands flew across the console. Multiple unidentified objects approaching. They're not responding to any standard communication protocols. Yoon-ji moved quickly. Defensive systems online. Prepare emergency protocols. But it was too late. The first impact came without warning. The ship shuddered, metal groaning like a wounded animal. Yoon-ji was thrown against the wall, her head striking the hard surface. For a moment, everything went white. When she opened her eyes, the research vessel was silent. Emergency lights cast a dim red glow across broken equipment and motionless bodies. Jae-sung lay nearby, his open eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. The other team members were similarly still. Yoon-ji tried to move but found herself held in place by some kind of energy field. Shadows moved around her, tall, angular shapes that seemed to shift and change even as she looked at them. They were not human, not even clothes. Alien hands, if they could be called hands, moved around her. They were more like clusters of thin, moving tendrils that wrapped around her body, scanning, probing. No one spoke. No sound came from these creatures. She was being taken. The last thing Yoon-ji saw before losing consciousness was a complex pattern of light and shadow, a language she couldn't yet understand, but desperately wanted to decode. Even in that moment of capture, her mind was working, analyzing, collecting every possible piece of information. The Horizon drifted silently behind them, a tomb of scientific equipment and broken dreams. And Yoon-ji Kim, the linguistic researcher who had mapped communication patterns across a dozen star systems, was about to become a prisoner of the most mysterious civilization she had ever encountered. Her real work was just beginning. The room was white, not a warm white, but a cold, sterile white that seemed to eat up all shadows and color. Yoon-ji Kim sat perfectly still, her eyes moving constantly, taking in every single detail of her prison. Researcher Guk watched her through a transparent barrier. He was tall, with skin that looked like polished stone and eyes that shifted colors like liquid metal. Around him, other remnant researchers moved with precise, calculated movements. Subject shows no typical stress responses. Huck spoke into a recording device. His voice was a series of clicks and low hums that somehow translated perfectly into human language. 47 standard cycles of observation complete. No verbal communication attempted. Yoon-ji didn't move. She knew they were watching her. Every breath, every tiny muscle twitch was being recorded and analyzed. Her training had prepared her for this. To become invisible, to become a blank canvas that absorbed information while revealing nothing. The containment chamber was a marvel of alien technology. Walls that could change texture and density. floors that could become soft or hard with a simple command, energy fields that could restrain or monitor biological activity. But Eunji saw more than just a prison. She saw a complex communication system waiting to be understood, a device extended from the wall. It looked like a cross between a medical instrument and a communication tool. Thin tendrils of light probed around Eunji, scanning her brain patterns, attempting to extract information. She remained perfectly calm. Her heart rate didn't change. Her breathing stayed steady. Fuck was becoming frustrated. In the history of the Remnant, no prisoner had ever resisted their communication technologies like this. Their society was built on constant information exchange. Silence was not just unusual, it was deeply disturbing. Initiate advanced psychological extraction protocol, Huck commanded. The room changed. Memories began to flood the space around Eunji. Holographic projections of her past, her childhood, her university days, her previous research missions, appeared and swirled like living paintings. Each memory was designed to trigger an emotional response, to break her mental defenses. A scene of her parents' funeral appeared, another of her most challenging academic moments of personal triumph and deep personal pain materialized around her. Most prisoners would break. Most would talk, would respond, would give something, anything, away. Eunji blinked. That was all. The Remnant researchers watched in growing confusion. Their most advanced psychological manipulation techniques were failing completely. Huck stepped closer to the transparent barrier, his color-shifting eyes fixed on the human woman. "What are you?" he muttered, more to himself than to her. Outside the chamber, other researchers began to argue. Their communication was a complex dance of color changes, body movements, and sound frequencies that would look like random noise to any human. But Eunji was watching. And more importantly, she was listening. Every movement was a word. Every color shift was a sentence. Every sound was a paragraph in a language most would consider impossible to understand. Eunji Kim sat perfectly still, and she was learning everything. The memories came flooding back, not the ones the Remnant had tried to force into her mind, but Eunji's own memories of how she became who she was. As a child, Eunji was different. While other kids played with toys, she studied the way people talked. Not just the words, but the spaces between words, the pauses, the way someone's eyes moved when they spoke. Her parents thought she was strange. Her teachers were confused. Communication is more than sound, she would say, even when she was just 7 years old. It's a whole world of hidden messages. Her first breakthrough came during her university years. While other linguistic students focused on spoken languages, Eunji studied the impossible. She researched communication patterns of deep-sea creatures, of insects, of plant networks. She learned how trees talk through underground root systems, how ants communicate through chemical signals, how dolphins use complex sound patterns that humans could barely understand. Her doctoral research was controversial. Most scientists thought she was crazy. Her paper, The Invisible Language, Communication Beyond Human Perception, almost got her kicked out of the academic program. But her research was solid. Her data was perfect. She proved that language was not just about words. It was about patterns, about space, about silence. The memory shifted. Her first space mission came back to her. A small research vessel studying communication patterns of distant star systems. Most researchers looked for radio signals. Eunji looked for something else. The spaces between signals, the pause, the silence. That mission changed everything. They discovered a communication network that existed between star systems, not through radio waves, not through light, something else entirely. A language so complex that it made human communication look like children's scribbles. Eunji remembered the day she presented her findings. The other researchers laughed. Her supervisor called her work impossible and fantasy. But she knew better. In her current prison, surrounded by the alien remnant, those memories became her weapon. Every moment of her past had prepared her for this. Every strange study, every ignored theory, every moment people said she was wrong. Now she was collecting data. The remnant thought they were studying her, but she was studying them. Their communication was a complex dance of color, movement, and sound. Most would see it as random, but Yunji saw patterns. Tiny, almost invisible patterns that repeated. Like a language waiting to be understood, her mind worked constantly. Mapping, analyzing, understanding. She remembered an old saying from her linguistics professor: to understand a language, you must first understand silence. The remnant didn't know it yet, but they had made a critical mistake. They had put a linguistic hunter in a cage, and hunters, when caged, become the most dangerous. Eun-ji Kim closed her eyes, and she listened, not with her ears, but with everything else she had learned in her life. The real conversation was just beginning. Tension grew inside the remnant research facility. Weeks passed, and Eun-ji Kim remained a mystery. Researcher Kuk paced the observation room. His color-shifting skin flickered between deep blue and angry red, a sign of growing frustration that would have been invisible to most human observers. But Eun-ji was not most humans. "She does nothing," complained a junior researcher named Min. His voice was a series of clicks that translated smoothly into human language. Absolutely nothing. The truth was far more complicated. While the remnant saw stillness, Eun-ji was working. Her eyes tracked every movement. She noted how researchers communicated, how they stood, how their skin changed colors, how they moved their strange, multiple-jointed limbs. The remnant had a problem they didn't understand. Their entire society was built on constant information exchange. Silence was not just unusual, it was terrifying. In their world, not communicating was like not breathing. It was unnatural, impossible. Huck reviewed the data logs again. Thousands of hours of observation, millions of biological and psychological tests, 0 results. The human prisoner ate when food was provided. She used the basic facilities when needed. She sat, she observed, but she never spoke, never responded to any communication attempt. It was driving the entire research team crazy. "We've never encountered a subject like this," Hook told the Senior Research Council. His skin churned with colors: worry, frustration, curiosity. "Our most advanced communication extraction technologies have failed completely." Deep in her containment chamber, Eun-ji allowed herself the smallest of smiles. Nobody saw it. Nobody was meant to see it. The remnant didn't realize that every moment of silence was a weapon. Every hour of apparent emptiness was a study. She was learning their language in ways they couldn't understand. Not through words, not through sound, but through everything else. More researchers began to arrive. Some were curious. Some were angry. Some looked at her like she was a puzzle they desperately needed to solve. One researcher, older than the others, with skin that seemed more stable in its coloration, watched her differently. Where others saw a problem, he saw something else, something unexpected. "She is collecting information," he told Huck quietly. Not resisting, collecting. Huck's color shifted to a sharp, questioning green. "Explain." The older researcher pointed at the observation logs. "Look at how she watches. Not like a prisoner, like a scientist." Eun-ji knew they were talking about her. She knew exactly what they were saying. Not from their words, but from their movements. The slight tilts of their heads, the way their skin changed color, the tiny movements of their multiple-jointed hands. Languages were not just about sound. They were about everything else. And she was becoming fluent. The remnant thought they were studying her. They were wrong. She was studying them. Every moment, every second, building a map of their communication that no one had ever created before. Silence, she knew, was the most powerful language of all. Something changed on the 49th day. Researcher Cook was running another standard examination. The device that usually scanned Eun-ji moved closer, thin tendrils of light probing, searching for any response. For weeks, these scans had produced nothing. Just silence. Just emptiness. But today was different. Yunji opened her mouth, not to scream, not to beg, not to ask a question. She spoke a name. Hyuk, she said. Just the name. Simple. Clear. The entire room froze. The scanning device stopped mid-movement. The other researchers around Hyuk went completely still. How did she know his name? Not just the sound of his designation, but his true name. The name that existed in the deepest part of remnant culture. A name that was never spoken outside of the most private internal communications. Hyuk's skin color changed rapidly. Waves of blue, streaks of red, patterns of green. A communication storm of emotion would be invisible to any human who didn't understand the remnant's complex language of color and movement. Impossible, he whispered. But Yunji wasn't finished. Min, she said next. Another true name. Another deeply hidden identifier that should have been impossible for her to know. The older researcher, the one who had earlier suggested she was collecting information, took a step forward. His movements were slow, careful, like someone walking near the edge of a cliff. How? He asked. Yunji looked directly at him. Her eyes were calm, totally calm. I have been listening, she said simply. In remnant culture, a true name was more than just a word. It was a complete history, a genetic record, a personal journey. To know someone's true name was to know their entire existence. It was a level of intimacy. It was sacred, private. And she had just spoken two of them. Perfectly. Completely. The room became a storm of silent communication. Skin colors shifted. Limbs moved in complex patterns. Sounds that were not quite sounds hummed through the air. Hyuk's junior researcher, Min, took a step back. His skin turned a pale, sickly color, a sign of deep fear and shock in remnant biology. She knows, he said. The words came out as a whisper. Yunji remained seated, calm, watching. She had just done something impossible. She had broken through the most protected part of remnant communication. Not with force, not with technology, but with pure observation. The older researcher, the one who had earlier seen her as a scientist, not just a prisoner, understood first. He recognized what she had done. She hadn't just learned their language. She had decoded something much deeper. Their entire system of communication. What are you? Hyuk asked again. The question was different this time. Not angry, not frustrated, afraid. Yunji Kim smiled. Just a small smile. But it was enough. The real conversation was about to begin. The interrogation room changed. Walls that were once solid white now shifted with colors. Not random colors. Precise colors. Each shade told a story. Each movement was a sentence. Yunji sat at the center, watching, listening. Explain, Hyuk demanded. His voice was different now. No longer confident. No longer in control. Yunji took a slow breath. Language is not just words, she said. It's everything. The space between sounds. The pause. The way skin moves. The way eyes shift. The older researcher, whose true name she now knew was Darren, moved closer. His movements were careful, calculating. You decoded our entire communication system in weeks, Darren said. It wasn't a question. Not decoded, Yunji corrected. Understood. The difference was important. In human communication, words were just sounds. In remnant communication, everything was a language. A color change could mean anger. A small hand movement could tell a whole story. A shift in body temperature could express complex emotions. Yunji had learned to read it all. Hyuk's skin was a mess of colors now. Fear, anger, confusion, all displayed in ways no human would ever notice. But she noticed everything. Your society suppresses individual identity, Yunji said quietly. Each of you has a true story, but your collective communication hides those stories. Min, the junior researcher, took a step back. His skin turned a pale blue, a color of deep understanding and sudden fear. Darren understood first. She sees us, he said, not to Hook, not to Min, but almost to himself. Yunji began to speak, not with words alone, but with a complete communication that used everything. Her eyes, her breath, the tiny movements of her fingers, the way she sat. She spoke their true names, not just Hook and Min, but names of researchers who weren't even in the room. Names that represented hidden stories, buried dreams, secrets that the Remnant Collective tried to hide. Each name was a weapon. Each name broke a small piece of their social structure. Huck's color-shifting skin began to stabilize. Not a good sign. In Remnant biology, a complete loss of color change meant total emotional shutdown. "You are dangerous," he said. EMG smiled. "I am a linguist," she corrected. The room felt smaller. The walls seemed to breathe. Communication happened in ways that no recording device could ever capture. Layers of meaning existed in every tiny movement. Darren understood something important. This human was not just a prisoner. She was a complete communication event, a living language that could not be contained. "What do you want?" Min asked. His voice shook. Eunjai looked directly at him. "To be heard," she said simply. And in that moment, everything changed. The Remnant had spent weeks trying to extract information from her. They didn't realize she had been extracting information from them, piece by piece, layer by layer. She was not just learning their language. She was rewriting it. The Remnant Research Facility began to break apart. Word spread quickly, if something like word could describe the complex communication of the Remnant. Yunjai had spoken true names, not just any names, names that cut deep into the heart of their collective society. In the central communication hub, researchers argued. Their argument was not like human arguments. It was a silent storm of color changes, body movements, and sound frequencies that would look like random noise to an outsider. But the noise had meaning. Darren watched from the edge of the room. His skin remained a calm, steady gray, the color of someone who understood something important was happening. He had seen communication systems fall before, but never like this. "She is breaking us." One researcher's skin flickered angry red and deep purple. "She is showing us," another responded, their skin shifting to a soft, understanding blue. Huck stood silent. His once vibrant color-changing skin now looked dull, flat, like someone who had lost something important. In the interrogation room, Yunji waited. She knew what was happening. Every true name she had spoken was a key that unlocked something deep in the Remnant's collective memory. Individual researchers began to challenge the collective protocols. Small arguments started, then bigger ones. The rigid structure of Remnant society, built on complete information sharing and suppression of individual identity, began to crack. Min, the junior researcher, approached Darren. His movements were different now, more hesitant, more individual. "What is happening?" he asked. Darren's response came not in words, but in a complex series of color shifts and subtle body movements. But for the first time, Min understood something important. The movement was personal, not collective, not part of the standard communication protocol. "We are remembering who we are," Darren finally spoke in actual words. Outside the facility, communication networks began to change. Messages that were once completely uniform now carried subtle differences, individual tones, personal experiences. Yunjai had done something impossible. She had introduced individuality into a society that didn't understand the concept. Each true name was a story. Each story was a crack in the system. Huck watched as researchers who had worked together for decades suddenly saw each other differently. Not as parts of a collective, but as individual beings with unique experiences. "How?" he asked Unji when he returned to the interrogation room. She looked at him. Her eyes were calm, patient. Language is more than communication, she said. It's about understanding, about seeing the person behind the words. The remnant facility was no longer a research center. It was becoming something else, a place of transformation, of awakening. Darren understood first. This human had not just learned their language. She had shown them a different way of existing, a way that valued individual stories, a way that recognized that silence could be more powerful than constant noise. The collective was breaking, and something new was about to be born. The final confrontation was not what anyone expected. EMG stood in the center of the research facility, no longer a prisoner, not quite free, something else entirely. Around her, remnant researchers moved differently now. Each one carried something new, an individual spark that had not existed before. Huck approached her. His skin no longer changed colors wildly. Instead, it held a steady, complex pattern, like a language waiting to be read. "You planned this," he said. It was not an accusation, more like a discovery. Yunji smiled. "I am a linguistic anthropologist," she replied. "My job is to understand, to connect, to show how communication can break walls." The facility had transformed. What was once a place of rigid research had become something alive. Researchers talked, not in the old collective way, but as individuals. They shared stories, personal experiences, things that were forbidden before. Darren stepped forward. He was different now, no longer just a researcher, more like a bridge between what the remnant were and what they could become. "You showed us our true selves," he said. The liberation was complete, but not through violence, not through force, through understanding, through language. Yoonji knew her mission was almost complete. She had not come here by accident. Every moment of her research, every study she had conducted, had prepared her for this. "Communication is more than words," she told the gathered researchers. "It's about seeing the person behind the language, recognizing that every individual has a story worth hearing." Huck stepped closer. The old fear was gone, replaced by something else. Curiosity, understanding. "How?" he asked. The question was simple, but it meant everything. Yeonji's response came not just in words, but in a complex communication that used everything. Her eyes, her breath, the tiny movements of her hands, the way she stood. She spoke their stories back to them. Not the collective stories, the individual ones, the hidden ones, the moments of joy, of pain, of personal discovery that the remnant society had forced them to forget. Each story was a key. Each word was a bridge. The facility's communication systems began to change. Messages that were once uniform now carried individual tones, personal experiences, small differences that meant everything. "We are not what we were," Darren said. It was both a statement and a question. Yoonji knew her work was done. She had not conquered the remnant. She had helped them discover themselves. "Communication is freedom," she said simply. Outside, the stars continued to shine, distant, silent, watching. But inside the facility, something new was being born. A society learning to speak, not with a single voice, but with many voices, individual, unique, connected. Huck looked at her, no longer an enemy, no longer a researcher studying a subject. Something else entirely. "What happens now?" he asked. Yoonji's smile was her answer. The conversation was just beginning. 1 month later, everything had changed. The remnant research facility was no longer a place of rigid control. Now it looked more like a school, a place of learning, of discovery. Individual researchers moved about, their skin telling stories that were uniquely their own. Yoonji prepared to leave. Darren approached her. His movement was different now, more fluid, more individual. "You are not what we thought humans were," he said. She smiled. "Humans are complicated," Yoonji replied. "We are not just one thing. We are many things." Her negotiation for release was unlike any diplomatic exchange in history. No formal documents, no official seals, just a complex conversation that used every possible method of communication. Guk watched from a distance. His skin told a story of respect, of understanding, of something that had been deeply changed. "What will you do?" he asked. Eunji looked at the stars visible through the facility's massive windows. "Continue to listen," she said. "Continue to understand." The remnant had learned something important. Language was not just about speaking. It was about hearing, about seeing, about recognizing the individual behind the words. Each researcher now carried their own story, their own color, their own voice. The collective was gone. Something better had taken its place. Min, the junior researcher who had once been afraid, approached Eunji. "We want to learn more," he said. His skin shifted with excitement, with possibility. Eunji knew her work was not finished. It was just beginning. "Communication is a journey," she told them, "not a destination." As she prepared to leave, the researchers gathered, not in a military formation, not in a collective group, but as individuals, each one different, each one unique. Darren handed her a communication device, but it was different from any device she had seen before. It was alive, changing, adapting. "A gift," he said, "from us, to you." The device represented everything they had learned, not a tool of control, but a tool of connection, of understanding. Outside, her research ship waited. The same vessel that had been attacked weeks ago, now repaired, restored. "Will you come back?" Huck asked. Eunji's smile was her answer. The facility's main communication hub now pulsed with individual colors, individual stories. The rigid system was gone. Something more beautiful had taken its place. As she stepped onto her ship, the remnant researchers watched, not with fear, not with control, but with curiosity, with hope. The stars outside seemed to watch too, silent, waiting. Eunji knew one thing for certain. This was not an ending. It was a beginning. Communication was not about speaking. It was about listening. And some stories were just waiting to be heard.